What's going on, Sky Squad? We are back in the building. It's your boy DJ Richie Skye, and just got back from Good Day DC promoting the interview that we did with Monique Samuels from Love and Marriage DC. So we got to talk about some news right now. Of course, the news was jumping, okay, during the hour that I've been gone. So we got to talk about it, all right? Before we get into that, make sure you guys hit that notification bell button, hit the subscribe button, hit that text button. Join the texting community 202-918-3386. And just so you guys know, we still have our sale going on. Get our CMOS capsules at 40% off with code Wanda. Okay, because we know we got to talk about Wanda. We talking about Miss Wanda. Okay, so we might as well use that code Wanda. Get that 40% off everything in the store. Okay, everything in the store. Click the link in the description down below. Get your CMOS capsules today. With that being said, let's go ahead and stage dive into what we got to talk about. Now, earlier we talked to you guys about, this whole situation where Martell reveals that Miss Wanda would no longer be on the show.
It's about Miss Wanda no more. It's a wrap for Miss Wanda. She gone. We ain't even got to even put in our conversations no more. We understand what she brought. She was a little humor. She brought a little.
So this is Martell going live to say that it's a wrap for Miss Wanda on Love and Marriage Huntsville. Okay. Just to give you guys a refresher, we talked about it earlier today, and shout out to Love and Marriage Huntsville and video credit to What's Happening 90. Okay.
Little laughter to the show and things like that. But when you speak about children, when they can't defend themselves, and then you have to have the parents to defend the children, it can get a little out of hand.
So there's him talking about how this is the end of the road for Miss Wanda. Okay. And we talked about whether or not, we should have Kiki come in to fill the space with that Miss Wanda is leaving behind. But as I was headed to Good Day DC, I started to get some notifications with people tagging me on a post on Instagram. So I heads on over to the Instagram and I says, well, let's see what's going on. Marsau tells a very different story. Okay. He tells a very different story on his Instagram story. He says, it's cute when people think their title holds weight. It's a little humbling when they realize that the only thing that makes decisions like that is money. As much as I don't like her, Wanda will be filming with us. Okay. So let's dissect this just a little bit, right? Because he definitely, and we talked about it earlier. We talked about, Melody and Martell sort of pitching this show. And I think even perhaps being listed as producers. I have to go back and check the credits. But he throws some shade at the titles. Okay. He says it's humbling when they realize that the only thing that makes decisions like that is money. And I will sort of agree with what he's saying there. I mean, because you have to look at what episodes, ranked the highest during the season, who was on those episodes, what was trending the most on social, and what characters trended the highest in terms of the character ratings for each episode and each franchise, right? So the network is going to look at all of those and try to determine what is going to make the most dollars and what's going to make the most sense in terms of ratings and advertising dollars. So there is some truth to what Marsau is saying here. Now, he also goes on to say, as much as I don't like her, Wanda will be filming with us. So Marsau is letting us know that despite what Martell has said about Miss Wanda being fired, that not so fast. It looks like Miss Wanda is back in the building officially on Love and Marriage Huntsville. So I guess until we hear it from Carlos King himself, or we see what happens at this season's reunion, we'll find out more whether or not Miss Wanda has been fired indeed or not. But according to Marsau, this woman will still be filming with her family, okay? At least, all right? Because I noticed that he did say she will be filming with us, okay? With us. So I'm not necessarily sure if he's just pointing out that it will be with he and Letitia, or the Scott family in general, or the entire cast. So we'll just have to wait and see. All right. Speaking of Carlos King, okay. Speaking of the Carlos King, I try to tell you guys each week that you guys need to be on the lookout for his podcast, Reality with the King. Okay. And on this week's episode, we get the doubleheader. Okay. We got a new episode with Claudia Jordan. Okay. Now, the caption reads, on today's podcast, I chat with Claudia Jordan about her time on Real Housewives of Atlanta, how I fought for her to be on the show, whether she rehearsed her read session with Nene, and she gets emotional about being misunderstood. One of my favorite convos. So, of course, as I was leaving Good Day DC, I had to put the podcast on and listen to it on the way home and gather my notes together. Okay. So, we're going to talk about Claudia's time on the Real Housewives of Atlanta. We talk about in the podcast, Carlos talks about, meeting Claudia downtown in West Hollywood and, quickly realizing that she was somebody that he wanted to work with. And he ended up, helping to facilitate to get her meetings with the production company, and the production company loved her, but the production company really was more interested in Demetria's story because Demetria also had the husband. She also had, the deep ties to Atlanta. And the good thing that Claudia had going for her was that she was friends with Kenya Moore, which is something that Carlos was interested in because he felt like Kenya Moore needed a friend. So Claudia reveals that she actually filmed the entire first season without getting paid, because she was already doing the Ricky Smiley show. And there had been some talk about her potentially doing This Nation, but then I think the whole thing went to Portia. I'm not necessarily sure. She does kind of clarify how that whole thing came about. She says there was a weird 3-week period of time where it could have gone either way for her to do Dish Nation or to just do the Ricky Smiley morning show. But ultimately, she ended up, doing the morning show and, having her gig there, right? And so she talks about how she really didn't get a fair shake on the show because, and Carlos admitted this as well, because it wasn't until, I guess, sometime quickly before the reunion at the end of the season, and I'm sure some of you guys have heard the story about how she really didn't actually officially sign her contract until maybe, I guess, sometime at the end of filming or right before the reunion or something like that. She signed the contract. And she talked about how she was able to negotiate one of the highest salaries for a new housewife because she had waited for so long and they had gotten so much great footage from her. And then they had to try to go back and re-enter her story throughout the season because, again, the focus was going to be on Demetria. But after the Puerto Rico session with Nene Leakes actually went and vouched for her and said, y'all got the wrong girl. Y'all need to give Claudia the peach instead of Demetria, okay? Because she's the one who has the potential. So what ended up happening was she ended up, negotiating, I think she said a 6-figure contract for her first season as a housewife, which is the highest for a new housewife ever, according to her, because typically they get in the 5 figures, which we do know, which we do usually hear about. Usually it's about $3,000 per episode. That's what I hear is the going rate for most starting housewives, just based on what I've heard from a couple of housewives who have started for their first seasons. So if she was able to negotiate in the 6-figure range, which is actually pretty good, that says something about the value that she brought to the season. And she says she kind of, wishes that she had gone back for her second season, even though they had offered her just a friend role, and really fought for that position to get back in as a housewife, but ultimately she didn't. She then goes on to talk about, her next gig at the Next 15 and how she felt like she has been misunderstood in this industry and how she felt like this was another opportunity for her to showcase a side of herself that maybe people wouldn't get to know. But according to her, it was the storyline with Jennifer Williams, because as you guys may recall, they feuded much of the season where, she ended up being called, a hoe and all of these other things, throughout the season. That became the focus. And she was just really disappointed, which ultimately led her to a falling out with Carlos King at a certain point in time because she was just so fed up with that narrative that is what she was. And she says that Jennifer even went so far as to try to partner up with her ex to get her annulment papers from her previous marriage or something like that. I was like, oh my. I didn't even remember it going that deep. I remember that they had a feud, but I didn't remember it going so deep. And she was like, yes. I mean, it got really dirty between the two of them. And I was like, oh, dang. Like, you know, she does go on to talk about how, on social media, she a lot of times feels like she, gets dragged because she's a very honest and direct person and she's not going to package things in a pretty package for people, so a lot of times it does feel as though she gets labeled with things that stick to her and she feels like it's very, very unfair. And this is one of those examples of a label her getting stuck with a label and it being unfair. Then she does go on to talk about the Real Housewives of Dallas because apparently she was in interviews and talks to join the Real Housewives of Dallas. But at the same time, she ended up getting the gig with Fox Soul. So she was having to fly out to Los Angeles to work, fly out from Los Angeles to from Dallas to Los Angeles. So she would have only been able to give them about, maybe a Wednesday or maybe some weekends. And that just wasn't ultimately going to work because they were trying to diversify the cast. And ultimately, I think that it ends up being a detriment for the show because really, quite truthfully, I think that had they had someone like Claudia on there versus some of the other cast members that they had, that the show would have probably picked up traction and gained a lot more steam. They needed a cast overhaul after Leanne left. I mean, it just is what it is at that point because ultimately she was the driving force for that franchise while it was in its heyday. And I felt like it would have been a great opportunity to add a name, a recognizable name and a face to that franchise, especially because she was living there and she has a lot of deep connections to a lot of the, other affluent women of color in the Dallas community. And she talks about that as well. She even jokes with Carlos King about, a potential new show in Dallas with her. So who knows what we will see moving forward. But I think that it was a loss not having Claudia Jordan on the Real Housewives of Dallas because I think that she was an asset to the Housewives franchise, whether people like her or not. I feel like she does oftentimes get labeled unfairly as well, because for the most part, she's doing her job. She's doing her job. And it's no different from the job that a lot of other people do on a lot of other shows, like on Entertainment Tonight, Access Hollywood, Page Six, all of those other types of shows as well. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section down below. Did you realize that Jennifer Williams had tried to get this woman's annulment papers from her ex, during her time on the Next 15? And that show was ahead of its time. I think if the Next 15 had come out today, it would definitely still be around in about season 3 or 4 at this point in time. Let me know your thoughts on these stories. Do you think that Miss Wanda is gone for good? What do you think about that? Do you think that Claudia should have joined the Real Housewives of Dallas? Let us know down in the chat down below. With that, I will see you guys in the next video.